At roughly $45 a person, is that Disney Animation Immersive Experience that you keep seeing ads for worth it? Let's find out. I just went to this in Denver, so I'm going to show you what it's like, what I thought, and make sure to keep watching because I'll share a few things that I would have wanted to know before I went. Also, I promise that this video won't be an hour of motion sickness like other videos covering this on YouTube. A huge reason why I'm making this video is because I got motion sick watching those videos. Real quick, let's talk about money because I think a lot of people are spending more on this than they should. You should absolutely Google for coupon codes, but there are ways to make this more affordable. No doubt this event is expensive for about an hour's worth of entertainment. For me, my wife, our 3-year-old, and our 2-month-old who is free, we spent about $140, and that was with a 25% coupon code because those service charges are ridiculous. And you might be wondering about the upsells. Those include things like LED wristbands and seat cushions that you return after the event. Those flashing LED wristbands are kind of like the ones you'd get at a Taylor Swift concert or a playoff basketball game. They really only look cool if everybody has them, and here only a subset of people will have them. Also, about those seat cushions, especially if you're bringing kids to the event, they're probably not going to be sitting for a good portion of the time because the floor is interactive and there are a few surprises that are going to make them run all over the place. At least in Denver, we went after the initial hype died down and there were plenty of benches available. I personally don't feel like we missed out on anything by skipping those upsells. And as much as your ticket might tell you that you need to arrive 30 minutes before the show, I really don't think you have to. This might bring you a lot of relief if you're a parent with small kids who make arriving early nearly impossible, or you're just an adult who runs late all the time. For the show in Denver, our family showed up about 10 minutes late and I was all stressed out because I thought I missed like 15% of the show. It hadn't even started yet. I'm absolutely not suggesting showing up late, but if you show up on time, you'll be just fine. I wouldn't show up any later than we did because the show kicked off pretty much right as we were walking in. And again, because the show is about an hour long, every minute counts. Before you get into the immersive room, there's kind of a holding room / activity room where you can look at clay models of characters and do some drawing as a warm-up. Some kids might like this, but it might actually be more interesting for adults. I tried, but our 3-year-old wasn't really interested in it. He wanted to just get into the immersive room because it felt like he was watching movies on a Sunday morning. And now let's get into the action, the thing that you're paying the big bucks for, the immersive Disney experience, baby. We did the immersive Van Gogh here in Denver, and the first thing that I noticed is that the music was quieter and the room was a little brighter for the Disney experience. It really makes sense because over half of the people there were kids. They also offered sensory-friendly versions of the show that were a little bit quieter. Our son doesn't particularly love loud music, and not once did he say that it was too loud. An important thing to know is that if you can see one short wall and one long wall, you're in a good spot because those walls just repeat on the opposite side. And while you could spin around and try and take in all 360 degrees of the show, 180 is just fine because the other 180 is the same thing. You can take a guess at how old I am, but I'm an old millennial, and something that surprised me a little bit was the soundtrack for the show. I was over here selfishly thinking that this was going to be a throwback for adults. 2D Lion King, Aladdin, Little Mermaid, you know what I'm talking about. And while that generation of Disney is well represented, there's also a lot of modern Disney that today's kids probably know a lot better. We're talking about Frozen 2, Encanto, Zootopia, Princess and the Frog, and more stuff from the past decade or so. There's a lot of that. And really, I think that the mix of songs and scenes that they chose for this is really good because they chose to appeal to the kids first, but they also wanted to make it entertaining for the adults who are probably bringing the kids to the event. Our son is a big fan of classic Mickey, Donald, Winnie the Pooh, and he loves a Goofy movie, so that was a little bit of a disappointment for him not to see much of that represented here or to hear jams from Powerline, but he still enjoyed the music. So whether you're into Disney of the 80s, 90s, or 21st century, they're all pretty well represented here, and there are clips that go even further back. If you go here with your kids, it's kind of a cool way to experience the Disney that both you and your kids know all in one show. One quick warning, there was one part of the show that our son did find a little scary. Not like cover your eyes and crying scary, but there was a compilation of villains that he didn't totally love. Luckily, it wasn't anything that he couldn't get through, and I think it's because there are some small touches that make the whole thing feel pretty magical for younger kids. For us in Denver, we had not one, not two, but 3 separate times that bubble machines turned on, and somehow the kids seemed to be surprised every time. It really feels like these are timed just right, because right when you're thinking like, man, we've been sitting for a long time, it's bubble time. Also, make sure to pay attention to the floor while you're inside. For large portions of the show, the floor reacts as you're walking through it. You'll walk around and notice that leaves and flowers are spreading and stars are following you at your feet, especially if you've got a kid who's more interested in running around like crazy during the whole thing instead of sitting down and watching the show. This is a good thing. And just like the bubbles, this feels smart to me because kids are all going to enjoy this in their own ways. You know, some are going to sit there, take in the music, watch the walls, and have a great time, kind of watching it like an adult would. And then there are going to be other kids that want to just run around, have fun being in this really immersive environment, touching the walls. It works for both. It's a Disney thing, you know, primarily for kids and families, and it feels like it's pretty accommodating to whatever type of family you have. This is a family-friendly thing, and at least for us, the space was huge, so you could kind of enjoy it however you wanted to. Something that I'd really recommend, I really enjoyed doing this with my son, is walking around and looking at the screensaver after the show is over. Now, if you're watching this with your kid, you're probably having to explain what a screensaver is, and if you are, I apologize. This is there at the start of the show too, but again, we were a little late, so we didn't get to take it all in before the show started. He loved seeing all the characters who are represented as either art or statues on the walls, and while he has been to Disneyland, he certainly hasn't seen every Disney movie, but it was still very exciting for him. And no disrespect to Dumbo, but he'd point to Dumbo and be like, what's that elephant's name? And then he'd get really excited when he saw a statue of Mickey or Donald or saw Pluto on a picture. It was just really fun and kind of a nice way to wind down after the show. And since it was quiet, it was a nice way to talk about the different characters that he saw during the show, what his favorite parts were, and, you know, it was a nice way to squeeze a little bit more out of a pretty expensive morning. Okay, so again, $140 for a family of 4, using a coupon, one of us was free. It's not cheap. That's probably more expensive than most aquariums and zoos near you. Then again, it's indoors. When we went, it was rainy, it was windy, and this was something we could do with our family that our son was really excited about. On our drive home, he kept saying that was pretty cool, and that's a solid review. We certainly aren't Disney fanatics, but as a family, we really enjoyed the show. Our 2-month-old was asleep the whole time, but we'll pretend he liked it too. If you can afford it, even with the heavy price tag, I do think that this is a great way to spend part of your morning or afternoon, especially on a bad weather day when you just have nothing else to do. It's kind of like going to a very expensive 1-hour movie, but the floor, the bubbles, the scale of the room, and the experience make it feel pretty special. And for me, as an adult, I can honestly say that I enjoyed this substantially more than I did the immersive Van Gogh, and it's probably because of the music. Of course, I'm more about the nostalgic parts of the soundtrack, but newer jams like Show Yourself from Frozen 2, not gonna lie, kind of a dope song, maybe listen to it during work. That's my take on the Disney Animation Immersive Experience, and I hope it helps you decide if you want to check it out in your city.